47.
I'm sorry, I forgot to set the record.
Do you want to record it midway or just?
We will. We'll go from here on.
From here on. All right. The next restoration area that I'm going to talk about is this oval shape in yellow. About the same time that we began the Front Prairie recreation, we had the opportunity to purchase our neighbor's property after they clear-cut 7 acres of trees that had provided us a really great buffer. And it was one of the reasons that we had purchased our property. We loved being nestled in the forest with a ton of privacy. I couldn't even imagine anybody cutting down a tree. And then this happened, and to me, I was devastated. But what really was a travesty to me actually became an opportunity that has completely changed my life. Since I was working with brownstone on the Front Prairie, my immediate reaction to fixing this visual blight was to recreate a prairie from scratch like we were doing in the front. And that entailed ripping out all the stumps, getting rid of the debris, killing all the grasses and the bad stuff that had started coming up, and starting fresh with a nice clean canvas. And if you recall earlier, I talked about wanting a nice clean canvas. Clearly, I have a demonstrated preference from starting from scratch, but that unfortunately was a huge mistake. The first unknown to me was the concept of restoration. And I referred earlier to the Front Prairie as a recreation. And as I said, a recreation is where you basically have something that is 99% non-native and bad. And you've got to get rid of everything that's there in order for your recreation to be successful. You're recreating something that may have historically been there, or you're recreating something that, even if not historically there, is something that we want to put there. In contrast, restoration is where you actually have good things in the seed bag and good plants coming up, and they're mixed with bad things. And what you want to do is you want to control the invasives, control the woodies, get rid of the bad stuff while promoting the good stuff. And what I didn't know is that this really was a restoration site, and much of that stuff coming up was good. And so by pulling up the stumps and letting the contractor dig big holes to burn the wood debris, I destroyed the topsoil and I obliterated a seed bank that likely was filled with seeds and rootstock from great prairie and savanna species. But at the time, ignorance was bliss, and I began programming the area based upon what I knew. And I was concerned that that chert was so barren, it looked like the surface of Mars. I was concerned that nothing would grow in it. And a local forester that I was working with advised me that there was federal cost share money available for planting shortleaf pines and that they would grow well on the chert. And although I was skeptical, we decided to plant shortleaf pines in the top 3.5 acres, which you can kind of see is that chert area. And we ringed that area with basically a horseshoe shape of a prairie mix. And we used more of an ecological prairie mix than that Front Prairie, because this wasn't fronting on the highway, and we didn't feel that it needed to be as much of kind of a billboard prairie. And I was also really interested to see how the two prairies would compare and develop. And we had some of the same species in both the Front Prairie and this prairie. And so again, I was curious to see what would happen. This photo was taken about 2.5 months after we seeded it, and you can see the nurse crop starting to come up. And it looked promising until I learned about erosion. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but needless to say, one of the consequences of digging up all those stumps, getting rid of everything, and having a pretty significant slope is that as soon as it started to rain, the erosion just became unmanageable. It was a saga to get it fixed. It took a few tries. We had a lot of bad erosion across the prairie that we have since filled with riprap and other debris to stabilize it. And the good news is it finally stabilized. And this is a picture probably after about 18 months. So these are a lot of the early species coming up. And there are a lot, what's interesting that there are a lot of different critters in the front prairie. We have far more grasshoppers in this one. We have more dragonflies, although we're starting to see a lot of dragonflies as well in the front prairie. Very happy to welcome the butterflies, and there are a ton of them in here. And this slide exemplifies some of the differences between this prairie, which I'm going to refer to as Westworld, as compared to the front prairie, you know, just for ease of reference, because we call this one Westworld and the one in the front prairie. The Westworld prairie has a whole different feeling. The front prairie is still like a prairie on steroids. Even though we don't have that pure, unadulterated color, everything's just really, really big and tall. And it's wall-to-wall plant and grass. Whereas this one, as a result of what I did to the soil, it has much more of a feeling of barrens to it. There's space between the plants. And some of the species are coming up more quickly here than in the front prairie. So for example, the Liatris spicata in the front prairie, which was seeded before this one, maybe I have 3 or 4, maybe this year, hopefully 5 coming up. But in the Westworld prairie, we've got, I don't know, 100 of them. And I have to tell you, the Liatris spicata is also a butterfly magnet. I have never seen more butterflies in one place than I saw on the Liatris spicata this last year. Also, the Eryngium yuccifolium, the rattlesnake master, is coming up much more quickly here and much more prolifically. And unlike the front prairie, which, as I mentioned earlier, was more of a summer bloomer, you know, June 28th about it hits its peak. This prairie really peaks later in the summer and the fall. And the chert out area is turning out to be really surprising. Somehow amazing things in the seed bank are coming back. For example, this is Nablus barbatus, which is considered rare, and it showed up in the middle of the chert. And I have no idea where seeds or rootstock could have come from, given the soil up there probably came from the bottom of a 10-foot hole and it was just redistributed. Just as an aside, my theory is that Nablus barbatus is not actually rare, but just that the deer love it so much that it never makes it to a recognizable size. It's been estimated that there are only 35 to 70 remaining populations of Nablus barbatus, I think globally, but I have at least 20 separate groupings of it on my property, and it shows up on a lot of other properties in Dixon County and the Western Highland Rim generally. And it may be that Dixon County is just a hotspot, but to me, it undermines the notion that there are only 35 to 70 populations. We have also a lot of Desmodium and Lespedeza species establishing in the chert areas, which I'm told is a very good sign. And it's going to be interesting to see how this chert area continues to develop, how long it will take to recover, given the damage that I did to it, except for, remember that we've got shortleaf pines planted up there, and as those grow, they're going to shade out some of these species, and it's going to change the nature of the restoration. And it may be that I make the decision to turn it from a shortleaf pine area to more of a shortleaf pine savanna, and I cut back a significant portion of them. Because if it turns out to be the treasure that I think it is, then that's going to be more important. So I mentioned earlier that we're starting a new prairie recreation, and I'm hoping to fix a number of mistakes that I made with the front prairie. This is the new 2-acre area, and there are 2 significant changes I'll be making. First, I'm designing a much more diverse seed mix with less grasses. So, because I mentioned earlier the balance of the grasses, I'm going from about 4 acres of grass per acre to I think like 1.87 acres of grass, or pounds of grass per acre. So it's a more diverse seed mix with less grass, so it's got a longer bloom period, and hopefully so it's more balanced. And my goal is that it prevents that early spring summer flush of blooming that then later in the season dies back and kind of dilutes the beauty of the fall bloom. The species list includes if you remember, my species mix at Roundstone on the front prairie was 27 species. My species list now from Roundstone is 45 species, and I've got an ambitious list of wild harvested seed that I'm collecting both from my own property and other remnants in Dixon County. The second big change that I'm going to try to do is introduce arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi into the soil through a process of autocatalytic nucleation. And that's a mouthful, but in essence, as many of you probably know, and I'm going to call arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi AMF just because it's a lot easier. AMF lives in the soil and has a symbiotic relationship with native plants that facilitates the uptake of water and nutrients. Professor Liz Kojal has done great research on this and has a chart showing the level of association between AMF and many native plants. And it's often the more conservative plants that have the highest association. And this also may help explain the difference in the plant establishment between my two prairies. Even though I totally screwed up Westworld, it likely has AMF in the soil, whereas the converted fescue pasture just doesn't have any because there were no native plants in there to keep that association alive. So by introducing AMF into this new recreation, I'm hoping the more conservative species will have a better chance of establishing. And I'm going to be using soil from our prairie remnant, which will be the last restoration area I'll talk about in a few minutes, as well as an AMF product that Professor Kojal makes through her company, Mycobloom, and she sells it. And that's what we're going to be using for the inoculation process. Now, as for autocatalytic nucleation, that's where you create a critical mass of AMF that hopefully spreads. And you can see in this slide, I have a number of 30-foot diameter nuclei that I will plant inoculated plugs around the perimeter, as well as in an inner circle, about a third in from the outer circle. And I'm going to be using plugs that we inoculate of Eryngium yuccifolium and Coreopsis tripteris, because those two plants have the highest association with AMF. And I'm happy to explain more of this to anybody if you're interested. I can send you Professor Kojal's, she's got videos talking about this, and also there's some research articles. And once I learned about this inoculation process, this is somebody who's helping me out in our front prairie. I am inoculating the 26 Eryngium yuccifoliums that have come up there with remnant soil from our prairie remnant. And although I don't expect that there is enough critical mass here for the AMF to actually take hold, I just had to try. I couldn't help myself. The next restoration area that I'm going to talk about is a 9-acre savanna woodland restoration. And that's the area that is outlined in black and shaded in green. And this is about 13 acres that was forest that had been selectively cut probably a couple of times. There were a lot of down trees. It basically looked like it had been hit with straight line winds. I want to take a moment to briefly explain the difference between prairies, savannas, and woodlands for anyone who hasn't had the good fortune to spend as much time as I have around the Southeastern Grasslands Institute people. Prairies, savannas, and woodlands are all grasslands. The defining characteristic is an herbaceous ground layer with grasses and forbs. They differ in that prairies don't have trees, savannas have up to 30% tree canopy, and woodlands can have from 30% to 80% tree canopy. And from 30% to 80% creates this spectrum of an open woodland to a closed woodland. Forests are 80% to 100% tree canopy, but they have no herbaceous ground layer. Forests have their role, but grassland ecosystems support a much greater diversity of insects and wildlife. Forests have lots of advocates, and there's lots of great work being done on preserving forests, recreating forests, and grasslands are only just beginning to get a voice at the table. I knew that this area had likely been a savanna woodland in a prior life, in part because of indicator species like post oaks, which are fire tolerant, and Parthenium integrifolium or wild quinine. That is a characteristic savanna species. So once I knew that it had been a savanna woodland spectrum, I was all in. But so many trees and so many brambles. Picture these brambles leafed out. You couldn't see 5 feet ahead of you, and brambles make management impossible. Most of the worst invasive species infestations were taking cover in the brambles. So what do? First, you have to open up the canopy. And we started with the big trees. And we used the hack and squirt method for the big trees because there was nothing good left to have logged. It had been selectively logged. So what was left were trees that no logger would want. And although I could have paid to have it logged and just to have the rest of the big trees taken away, I didn't want to create the disturbance of the tree removal. So we ended up going with the hack and squirt. But just opening up the canopy with the big trees wasn't enough because the understory was impenetrable. So I ended up hand cutting most all of the understory and using herbicide. We couldn't burn it because it was too dense and fire wouldn't carry through it. And we had actually tried. And we had to get light in there somehow so we could stimulate the grasses that needed to grow to ultimately carry the fire. And so this is a side-by-side comparison. And you can see on the left side, I spent an awful lot of time cutting out what was on the right side, which was a lot of Carolina buckthorn. And although the Carolina buckthorn's native, it still created a completely shaded out the ground, and it had to go. But then the understory, getting rid of that is not enough. You have to slay the brambles. But brambles take vengeance. I learned, painful way, to generally never cut brambles without applying herbicide, like I did in the last photo. For every bramble that you cut without applying herbicide, you get 4 or 5 pissed off resprouts in its place. And they will grow 7 feet tall in one growing season. And when somebody told me they would grow that tall, I didn't believe them, but I saw it with my eyes. Unfortunately, even applying herbicide, and I've tried a number of different methods, it's not like you just apply the herbicide and then you cut it and you get rid of it and it's gone forever. They still resprout. It does seem to be getting better though, and I do think I'm making incremental progress. I have some thoughts on best practices, but it will probably be an ongoing process for a number of years, and not a task I look forward to. With all the work we've done, we were finally able to burn, but as I mentioned, we'll need the grasses to grow before we can burn again, because we don't have the leaf litter like we did from the trees that could carry fire. And we're seeing tremendous response after burning. And this is looking through Unit 1 of our savanna into the Westfield Prairie, and you can kind of see the Westfield Prairie dead grasses. This is what keeps me going. Again, this is the front edge of Unit 1, and you can see off to the right, you can see the Westfield Prairie. And we have this lovely mosaic of ecosystems that we're knitting together. And it went from, again, impenetrable and leaf litter to flowering plants. I see butterflies in there, I see bees in there, and it's really remarkable. And by the way, I just want to mention that if I had not done what I did to Westworld, it would have been a much easier savanna restoration than the savanna restoration I'm doing. Because at Westworld, all the trees, the understory, it was all gone. All I would have really needed to do is control the woodies as they were coming up, control the invasive species, and just let a few trees grow back, and then I would have had a savanna. All right, since this is the Tennessee Native Plant Society, I thought I would show you a list of some of the species that are coming back in the savanna woodland restoration. I've included here the C values, the coefficient of conservatism, as well as the H values, which is the heliophily value, and that's an indication of the species tolerance to shade versus sun. Plants with a 1 like indeed deep shade, and 9 needs full sun. And you can see based upon these values that they're pretty conservative species. And they are definitely more sun species than they are shade species. I've highlighted in yellow the ones I'm particularly excited about. And I will point out that buffalo clover was discovered on our property actually almost a year ago. And that is my claim to fame. Unfortunately, it did not come back this year. I was told that it did like ecosystems that have been burned, and we have burned the area. And keeping our eyes open, it might come back another year, but I am never letting go of the fact that I had buffalo clover on our property once. So this is the last area, and many in the restoration world consider this our gem, even though it's the smallest. It's the area in yellow towards the bottom of the screen. When we bought this property, it was about 1 acre of this mowed area, and then it kind of goes down a hill into a bottom forested area. And when we bought it, our neighbors were really excited because we agreed to mow it. The prior owner had mowed it for a while, and our neighbors really, really loved mowed areas. About 3 years ago, a very experienced restorationist, Will Overbeck, who was helping me out at the time, discovered in the area between where the mower stopped and the tree line started, there were some really great species popping up, just hanging on, just what little light they could get. They were there. And they were savanna indicator species like Coreopsis debilis, Nabilis barbatus, Parthenium integrifolium. We even have Salix humilis or prairie willow. And Will thought we had a bona fide prairie remnant, and he was right. Because the history of mowing that probably had gone back decades before we bought it from the prior owner, had likely eliminated many of those good prairie species that we were seeing in the tree line, we both stopped mowing and we thinned out that tree line. And the hope was that if we could bring more light in further into that wooded area, that those species would come back. And this photo doesn't actually show the thin tree line yet. The response was better than expected in the mowed area. We had tons of Schizachyrium scoparium, the little blue stem, and other prairie species come back. And this year, the response in the thin tree line has been remarkable. This is where I've got at least 14 patches of Nabilis. And as I mentioned earlier, the deer love them. The deer have munched several of them, but I remembered that deer stock works wonders. So I was just recently out there, and hopefully the deer will stay away from them. And if we actually have all these flowering Nabilis this year, it's going to be pretty special. This is 1 year later, and in this picture, you can see the Symphyotrichum patens, the late blooming aster, the Eurybia hemispirica, southern prairie aster, Solidago nemoralis, the field aster. And after this year, ready for the drip torch. And you don't burn the whole thing at one time. We have a path that's mowed down the center, and we burned one half of it. You want to keep an area of refugia for the wildlife to run from the burned area to the non-burned area. I've actually seen that happen. And also, this remnant hasn't had fire on it for probably hundreds of years. And just in case it doesn't work out well, at least you haven't messed things up on both sides of it. And this is what it looks like after it was burned. On the left, we've got the burned side, and on the right, we have the unburned side. And although you've got some of the species on the left coming up on the right side, they're way more prolific on the left side. Mm. And also, this slide also demonstrates that point I was making about landscape prairies, that they don't look as good when you've got the grasses coming up. Even if you had as many of the plants coming up as you do on the left side, I think that, again, the dead grass is coming up. It just sort of dilutes that billboard prairie look that we're hoping for with our front prairie, because we like to use it to continue to promote the message. And this is Penston pallidus. And big kudos to the woman who identified it. It looks a lot like Salvia lorata to me. And she clocked it. And it turns out that this is a rare species. It's not officially listed as rare, but there are only 62 specimens of it in herbariums going back to the early 1900s. And only one has ever been found in Dixon County, which of course was found by Dr. Blaine Estes. And so we're very, very excited. It has started to go to seed. I have bagged it so I can collect the seeds and I can put it somewhere else in this remnant where it'll probably be more likely to germinate. And finally, these are some of the species that are showing up in the remnant. Again, I've highlighted the ones that I'm super excited about. And the H values and the C values are even higher here than in the savanna restoration. And this again is a great indication that we're on the right track. So thank you very much for listening. And you can keep up with our restorations on our Facebook page if you're on Facebook at Best Hope Farm. Also, I have projects set up on iNaturalist for each of our restoration areas. And I have probably about 2,000 species or 2,000 observations. And so you can track what's there as well. And if there are any questions.
Wow, beautiful.
I guess I need to share my screen, right? Hold on a second. Stop share. Okay.
Okay, anyone with questions? You can either write it in chat or you can raise your hand and I think we're all stunned by how beautiful it all is.
Thank you very much. All right, Richard, you raised your hand. How do we get you going?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. How are you doing these H and C values? Is there some place to look those up?
Not yet. The Southeastern Grasslands Institute is working on an amazing database called Grasslandia, and they are going to have all of the H values and C values. It is a work in progress. They've hired additional people who are dedicated to this project, and I do have early access to it. I'm beta testing it a little bit. So some of these values may change a little bit, but if they're unclear about it, like you might have seen that there are a couple of question marks, and that's where, at least in the database right now, it's a question mark. But it's going to be a very, very exciting tool, and it's going to link to iNaturalist species pages, other resources as well, and so that's again where it comes from now.
Okay, so I thought I was missing something, but I guess I'm not. So I'll wait for it to come out.
Yes. All right.
Okay, LH Lubke had their hand up. If you'd like to unmute and ask. I don't know if it's Mr. or Mrs. Lubke. Lubke.
I think I saw some questions in chat.
Yes, it says comments. Anne Valentine says, that was fantastic. Thank you for the amazing work you've done. Macy Brown says, wonderful work. April, amazing. You've made a real difference and continue to.
Thank you.
Nick Douglas asks, how hard is it to get permits in your county, burn permits? What time of year are you burning?
I'm really glad you asked that question. It's very easy in my county to get burn permits. There's an online portal that you just basically apply. You used to have to call in, but now you just do it online. And it doesn't even matter the size of, the size of the burn that you're doing. The question about what time of year to burn is something I am obsessed with. There are a lot of different opinions depending on who you follow. There are some people that think that burning in the spring is a good time to burn, especially because there are not a lot of days where you can burn in the dormant season. But from a grassland restoration perspective, And there are a number of people that I follow on this. The Southeastern Grasslands Institute, for one. There's a guy named Justin Thomas, who I think has done great research on this. I will only burn in the dormant season. Well, I don't want to say only. I will mostly burn in the dormant season. And at the beginning of the dormant season, because if you burn at other times, the amount of nitrogen that you're putting into the system is nitrogen, as many of you know, native plants don't really like that amount of nitrogen. And the nitrogen in the system might result in things like blackberries or invasive species. If I want to set back some of my grasses, I may be willing to burn sort of in the fall before things have really gone dormant, but it still makes me nervous. So right now, I primarily want to burn in dormant. What becomes difficult is the dormant season is changing. This year, we didn't go dormant until very, very late, and then we greened up very, very early. So that dormant season is shrinking. And then, of course, you've got, the weather constraints. But because I've become a certified burn manager, and now my husband and I can burn together, and I have some people around me who can come help out if it's larger than I feel comfortable handling, I have much more flexibility to burn on that perfect day. If you have to hire, a division of forestry or somebody else to do the burn, and you have less flexibility, it does become more difficult.
Okay. Melissa asks, what is your Facebook page again?
Our Facebook page is called Best Hope Farm, and you all might recognize where that title comes from. It's homage to Nature's Best Hope, which really inspired the work that we do here. And when we were trying to come up with a name, and I said to my husband, who's much better at naming things than I am, he came up with the name.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Any more questions? Anyone? Any comments? Well, I think you covered that very well.
Okay.
And it was really interesting.
Next question. The Tennessee Division of Forestry has classes once a year, I believe, maybe twice a year. I believe there's one coming up soon and one in October, and you can get certified through them. It's 2 days. It's 1 day in the classroom, and then there's 1 day where you go out and you actually work on a burn line. And I would encourage you, a lot of people didn't actually want to operate the drip torch and do that. I encourage you just to do it. I didn't want to do it, and somebody forced me to do it, and I'm really glad that he did.
And comments, I can't believe I haven't heard of your farm. So glad I did. Sue Bible says, really good. Thanks so much for your time and hard work.
And I want to thank Sue, because I know Sue Bible's name from the Southeastern Grasslands Institute. I was the interim director of operations there for a short period of time until they got a permanent director of operations. And so I heard all about you, Sue, and I never had the chance to meet you.
My name precedes me, says Sue. April says, dare I ask how much money for something the size of the front prairie?
Well, we spent about $900 an acre for the seed mix. If you go through the USDA program, you can get about $1,000 an acre as I think they call it like a beginning farmer, a new farmer. I have some thoughts on going through the USDA process to get the money. It is a lengthy process, and there are some constraints. On the new prairie recreation that we're starting, we're probably at about $900 an acre again for the seeds. So that is just the seeds. The herbicide application is not all that expensive. I've got a forester that does it for me and gives me a good deal. And one of the challenges is, how do you get the seed in the ground? I can't believe I'm doing this, but I am probably going to do the seeding this year myself on the new prairie recreation, as well as my neighbors down the street. And I might even hand seed it actually. Or I might get a tow behind my UTV and, because again, we don't have a lot of people who know how to get the seed in the ground. When we paid Roundstone to drive down from Kentucky, it cost me more in mileage than it did to actually drill the seed. So if you happen to be in an area where somebody has a drill and can do it, that could be a more affordable way to go.
Okay.
By the way, I also want to mention, anybody who wants to learn more about this, I mean, I did try to condense it and stop myself from going down a lot of wonky lanes, but I think the thing I'll say in closing is, this is really old. This kind of restoration is new. And our vascular mycorrhizae fungi, that is cutting edge restoration. So we're all still trying to learn how to do this. And a lot of people see one piece of the puzzle, and as a property owner, I have to know, and it's my property, I have to know a little bit about everything. So I have a kind of a 360-degree, view of it all. And I've had to learn it the hard way. So again, if anybody is interested at all, I'm just trying to spread the word, and I'm happy to help if you even want to try a bite-sized piece.
Great. Lori Bruno says, thank you for creating the beautiful prairie. Melissa says, thank you. Lori again comments, do you open your prairie up for groups like Wild Ones or TNPS to see?
I will give a tour of our property to anybody who wants to tour it. We had the Southeastern Grasslands Institute had a field day here last year, and it was somebody actually on that tour that discovered the buffalo clover. Now, at that tour, you do get Dr. Estes speaking as well, and so that's quite a benefit. Our Western Highland Forest Association did a field day out here, which I was really happy about, because a lot of people who are involved in forest management, rather than just sell your timber and let everything just grow back, there's an opportunity to do savanna restoration. And there are a lot of people who are interested in doing that. And so, yeah, I'm happy to whoever wants to come. So, Karen, are you going to bring a group?
I'm not the field trip leader, but
the last thing I'll say about
Richard does field trips too. We could probably do a joint one.
The last thing I'll say about that is, what's really special about our property is we do have 73 acres. And so we have forested areas. We have a little bit of everything. So we've got prairie remnant, recreation, savanna woodland, intact forest. We've got about 3 miles of hiking trails everywhere that my husband has created that are wonderful. And so we've got this whole, this mosaic in a very manageable size. So you can demonstrate a lot. And that is in part also, and we're also across the street from Montgomery Bell State Park, where they're doing amazing savanna woodland restoration right now. And we've created this conservation corridor. I know, Karen, you look surprised.
I am. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you all about that as well, but you can take the hook and take me off. So they're doing that there, and we're sort of creating a conservation corridor along Highway 47. Absolutely.
Lori Bruno says, I would love to see it. It's so beautiful. John says, great presentation as usual and great work.
And the other thing, I've invited people who just want to experience the front prairie, just come on down, pull off the gravel driveway onto the side of the road. You can walk around it. You can walk through the horseshoe path. You rode around the back. My view is the more people who come out, the more people who take pictures, the more people who post about it, the better.
Positive feedback, and it's positive for the idea of restoration. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Ann Valentine, who's down in Memphis, says she's driving across Tennessee soon. hope to be able to stop by. Well, that's
Okay.
true, Ann. If you're coming to the conference in the east end of Tennessee, you
Yeah,
could
yeah. And
ostensibly drive past.
I'm going to take my time getting way out there. You know, it's about as far as you can go and still be in Tennessee.
Yes,
When is the
yes.
conference?
June 7th, 8th, and 9th
Right.
up on Roan Mountain.
I
So
was,
yes, Ann, if you're coming that way, it's not that far off of 40.
Yeah, I'm thinking I could probably hopefully stop by on my way back to Memphis. Have a nice
Okay,
that would be great.
leisurely drive. Yeah. I'd love to
it's
see
nice
it.
to have a plan like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to let everybody go and say good night. Deborah, this has been fabulous. You've hit a nerve with a lot of folks.
Great. I'm glad.
So
I'm very
thank
gratified.
you. Thank you
Thank you
so
all.
much.
Thank you
We
for
have
listening.
enjoyed it. We appreciate it. And all the work that you've done, we appreciate. So
Thank you all.
wonderful.